Pop quiz. How can we incorporate our cultures into a fantasy setting that we're trying to write? Especially if they are not within the but the typical cultural things that are used in fantasy, whether contemporary or, historical fantasy. That's what we're gonna discuss today on StoryPod podcast. Come on in, bestie. Welcome to StoryPod, where we do the doing of story development together. Brought to you by Creative BFF. StoryPod podcast. What we do, is we I am on one. We put in these reps. Okay, we get here, we do the work of, getting the juices flowing, putting in these story reps, working on questions, asking questions, answering questions, as it were, to build our storytelling muscles so that when it comes time for us to write our own stories, we've already got the guns. The gun show is already on deck. All right, we've already been lifting 225 pounds, okay? So that when we bring that heat to our own stories. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to find ways to tell you what we do here, because as I do these, my own understanding of what we do here at StoryPod podcast, Creative BFF, is refined. So anyway, my name is Ashley. Thank you for joining me today. All right. Thank you for bearing with me as always, because we're friends. All right. If you have any storytelling questions for your own story, listen, that is my favorite thing to do. Please feel free to shoot me a question. You can do so at my email, which is ash@creativebff.com, or you can go to my website, creativebff.com, and there's a contact section where you can send me a message, and all that information is in the description below. So you can find me. I have an Instagram also. I never promote it because I am so bad at social media. I'm trying to get better. Help me this year. I'm going to try to get better at it. But anyway, to our question, our Reddit question, because you and I have not had a chat yet. You haven't sent me your question yet. So we're going to go to Reddit. And the question for today, as you may already know, is by Feeling Weird Crazy on the r/writing questions subreddit. The question is how to incorporate my culture in the world building of my fantasy history. I'm Venezuelan, and I got this idea of trying to add my culture in one of my stories, but I really have no idea to do it, like making a culture based on Venezuelan culture, but I'm kind of lost and I don't know where to start. Any ideas? I kind of already have some ideas about myths and more, but I really don't know how to incorporate elements of my culture to the kind of already established fantasy genre. English is not their first language, and they're writing on their phone, so we will give them grace. Okay. So, first and foremost, any sort of culture of the world is so vast and broad and has so much history in it that you could pull from. It's kind of hard, if not impossible, to give a specific answer to how you can do it, because it's going to also depend on what story do you want to tell? What time period do you want to set your story in? What aspects would be relevant to your aspects of your culture would be relevant to your story? So in order to sort of get our mind around it, and I welcome your answers too, those of you who are watching and listening, I'm interested in your answers. This is just kind of where I would start to kind of look for these things. But if you have some answers to this question and better ones, perhaps even better ones than I can give, all right? Because I'm not perfect. Listen, we all just out here trying to make it, you know what I'm saying? But I would say, look at fantasy right now that's popular, and the cultures that often inform fantasy. and do what they did, but just make it your own culture. So things that they pull, listen, I wrote some notes. Okay, listen, I'm going to look at my notes. Don't hate on me for it, okay? Because whatever, I wrote some ideas. So basically, a lot of what makes up our fantasy, there's way more diversity in it now. But for a long time, a lot of what made up our fantasy was based in like European cultures, right? And if I'm wrong, tell me. I can be wrong. I don't get it right all the time. But what I'm remembering of fantasy that I've consumed throughout the years and that I see is a lot of European culture. So we're using like the political structures of different European cultures, right? In different time periods. So I'm thinking of something like, for example, the video game Dragon Age, one of my faves. I'm pretty sure I've talked about it before. But a lot of the aesthetic, a lot of the political structures are based on European things. So we've got kings and queens and castles, and let's even look at like what I'm remembering of Lord of the Rings, right? We've got elves, and we've got obviously kings and queens, and we've got these I'm thinking about the visuals of the movie, like these vast castles and courts of these people, and the Rohirrim, and riding the horses in the fields with their long blowing whatever. So a lot of it is based off of European cultures, because that's a lot of the early fantasies that at least were coming to the Western world were coming from people who wrote in those cultures. And they wrote their political structures, like I mentioned. They wrote their morality based on the society that they grew up in, or at least that they had, the society they grew up in. They wrote from their mythology, whether or not, the mythology was a religious thing that they actually believed. Because, they could be, for example, they could have been Christian, but they're pulling from the myths of the pagan history of their homeland. So they're pulling from their pantheon of gods. They're pulling from their ideas of how magic works and things like that. They're pulling from their standards of beauty. When they're describing the heroes and heroines, they describe what is beautiful in their culture. Looking down at my notes. Yeah, the social mores, the religion, like I already said, the myths and things like that. So basically, I would look at how the fantasy that you're familiar with that doesn't incorporate, Venezuelan culture or whatever other culture, and just see what do they pull from to write their stories. I mean, we are also getting fantasy stuff from Asian cultures, and so that's kind of becoming more popular in the West and around the world. So a lot of, for example, the anime that we get is based in their ideas of religion, their concepts, for example, of demons. They don't have the same concept of demonic entities necessarily that the Western world has, the Judeo-Christian world has. So it's a different thing. They base their stylistic visual choices on their culture, right? The morality, how relationships work, things that they find attractive and beautiful, they pull from their culture for that. So what I would say is look to your Venezuelan culture, your Venezuelan history, or whatever culture listener that you are, whatever part of the world you're from, and you want to incorporate your culture into a fantasy, but you're not sure how to do it. Identify what time period your story is going to be in. Identify a general idea of like, what kind of story do you want to tell? A plot type of thing, romance type of thing, power structures that you're interested, like when I say power structures, yes, political and stuff, but also like magic, what type of magic and things like that. So what are you interested in bringing in your story? And look to your culture, look to, like the person said, look to your myths, look to the if you have if your culture has like a pagan god situation, pantheon of gods and things like that, look to those stories. Look to how does your culture interact with supernatural elements, which can be an aspect of fantasy. So supernatural creatures, like, in European stuff, you've got fairies, you've got, all kinds of, we have the world of the fae, that kind of thing, which, maybe in like an Arabic culture, don't they have like the jinn? I don't know a lot about that, but that kind of feels like maybe there's some similarities there. I'm not trying to disrespect either one. I am not knowledgeable on the depth of either the world of the fae or the world of the jinn, but they both kind of feel like this other realm that we don't as humans regularly interact with, but that can affect our world. And sometimes there's a meeting of our world with that world, right? For good or for ill, you know what I'm saying? So look at that. If you want to have it more modern, look at the modern culture in Venezuela. Look at what's beautiful. What is the the standard of beauty in Venezuela? What is the concept of morality in society? What is seen as heroic? What is seen as evil? If it's anything different, humanity overall kind of has the same kind of general concept of what's good and evil, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, bring in political structures, ancient political structures. If you're trying to base it in the history of Venezuela, go back, do some research. What are the political structures? Most cultures, right, have kings and queens and princes and princesses and nobility, but it looked different based on the culture, right? So use those structures, that hierarchy, social hierarchies. So yeah, just research, how is it done in fantasy now? How is that dominant culture, the dominant European culture in fantasy stories, which is changing. Like I said, there's more diversity in it now, but how did they pull from their European culture to create fantasy? What elements did they pull from European culture to create fantasy? And now just do the same with yours. Girl, just do the same with yours. Pull from your historical roots. Pull from your political structures and societal structures and all of that kind of stuff. I'm going to end up saying the same thing over and over again because I'm going to wrap it here. I'm going to say that is my answer. All right. Again, as always, it depends on this type of story that you're trying to tell. But you can absolutely build the history of your world and base it on Venezuelan culture. Now, if you don't want it to be specifically Venezuela, but you want it to feel like that, give it a different name. Maybe that sounds too reductive, too simplistic, but you give it a different name and you mix your imagination with the cultural and historical and mythological and religious and societal history of Venezuela. There you go. That's my answer. I'm not going to say anymore. What do you think? How would you answer this question? If you've done this with your culture, or with, even with another culture that you're well versed in, and you use a non-European culture to be the basis for a fantasy story, or if you've seen it done well, let me know down below. How did they do it? How did they approach it? How did you approach it? And how would you advise feeling weird crazy to approach this for their own story? As always, listen, a pleasure and an honor to have spent some time with you, bending your ear a little bit on this. I hope that you got some juices flowing for your own story, your own world building, incorporating your own culture or other cultures into a fantasy setting or even any other type of setting, right? Until next time, next week, as it were, next Friday, because that's when we meet up. Okay, that's when we have our our gab sesh. Until then, listen, take care of yourself. Get some sleep, get some rest, okay? Drink some water. Go outside and touch grass. Breathe in some fresh air. And talk to somebody that you love. Have a laugh with somebody. Love you. Bye.